Welcome to Epilogue Podcast, the show where we discuss some stuff that happened on a different show ages ago which nobody really cares about anymore.
Hi, I'm Portponky.
And I'm LeBloc.
Today we're discussing Deep Space Nine, Season 2, Episode 21, the Maquis Part 2, or Maquis, if you want to pronounce it correctly.
I believe it's Maquis.
Okay. In this episode, Cisco saves the cat from the Maquis, and together they prevent them from escalating the conflict into a war.
So it was a half war.
No. I know you suggested that's what it was going to be, but describe how it was half a war. Justify yourself.
I'll pass.
Okay.
This was not half a war. This was on the brink of war and then dissipated. So maybe that's what a half war is.
Yes, to think they were only one constipated and badly paced space battle away from war.
That's what a half war is. You just described it perfectly. That's the definition.
I hope I never have to experience half a war.
So what did you think of this two-parter?
Well, this part I thought was fun, but pretty much because the cat was having so much fun.
Yeah, Golda Cat is great. I love that they've added layers to him and he's not just an outright villain. He obviously has villainous tendencies, but he's having fun, and that conversation he has with Cisco is really good in this part.
Yeah, he's got a lot more depth than he did before. Suddenly he's an intelligent, scheming, and powerful, both emotionally and physically, figure. He's pretty scary. It kind of adds depth to the entire Cardassian race. Now, we get a good glimpse of why they enjoy conquering people, because it looks like they'd be bloody good at it.
And people always gravitate to what they're good at. He has such a cool voice and a great presence, so I'm glad he's a recurring character.
The interrogation scene with him was almost hilarious. He seemed to be just having the time of his life.
So in the beginning of this episode, Cisco takes a casual stroll while Kira and Bashir are held at gunpoint, and I thought that was a little weird.
It was kind of awkward. They didn't really have a good plan. Bashir and Kira just looked lost and confused.
And Cisco was indifferent, so I would think he would show more concern for his crew.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he knew they wouldn't outright murder Starfleet officers, or a Bajoran officer. So he was probably reasonably comfortable that they were safe. But, yeah, those guys holding them hostage had terrible trigger discipline. One slip and they would have all been zapped in the face.
Not the best place to be zapped.
Probably not the worst place to be zapped either.
We get more Odo shapeshifting in this episode.
Oh, he finally did something I've been waiting from the start for him to do, which is to use his shape-shifting powers to apprehend someone.
Yeah, I would expect him to use more amorphous shapeshifting, where he's not turning into a table or glass or anything. He's just making himself wobbly and stretching and becoming useful for whatever the situation is. But I understand there are obvious budget constraints and they can't do that all the time, but that's what he should be doing all the time.
Yeah, I mean, here he just reaches across the room and it's up half the story to just pull a guy. It's odd that it took them 40 episodes before this happened.
Golda Cat says at one point, I wonder what else we have in common. And then Cisco just dismisses it. But I really like when villains point out how very little separates them from the hero. For example, in Raiders of the Lost Ark, Belloc, the antagonist, tells Indy, the hero, that they're not so different. And there's a flicker of recognition in Indy's eyes. And it's a wonderful scene. And I was hoping that's where this was going, but it was just a throwaway line. But maybe they'll explore it later. I don't know. But I was a little disappointed.
There was a knowing nod from Ducat later on, after Cisco explained something. Oh, that they were going to attack the depot because if they wait too long, the weapon locations might be moved. And Ducat nods as if Cisco has learned the lesson from Ducat somehow.
Yeah, as a Starfleet commander, you probably don't want Ducat's approval for your decisions.
He's like the kind of friend that you hate. You throw a birthday party and you're like, oh, Ducat, hi. I didn't know you were coming.
I didn't even invite you. That's strange.
And everyone's glancing around like, oh, why? Why is he here?
Suddenly the floor becomes very interesting. Everyone's staring down.
Ducat says, I've prepared a holodeck program for us all to enjoy. No one wants to go.
What would his program be?
Ducat, I can't tell if he is an outright pervert or just a simple family man that's misunderstood. He could be anywhere on the spectrum of disgusting evil.
I like the family man angle. I like imagining him as just a deeply misunderstood family man trying to do his job.
Well, yeah, he says he's got 7 kids. Maybe he goes home and it's like, oh, good day at the office. Blew up some guys.
Some guys need to be blown up, and they won't blow up themselves. Well, I guess some do, but he can.
The Zeppelite trader looked like he was almost ready to off himself after Ducat gave him a talking to.
Ducat and Cisco make an effective team.
Yeah, I think Ducat and anyone would make an effective team because Cisco is just like, oh, let's take the soft touch. Oh, that doesn't work. Let's take the medium touch. And then Ducat said, okay, for goodness sake, give me the controller. He was hand-holding them through the entire process, more or less. I mean, they didn't take his advice all the time, but whenever they did, it worked out really well.
Never send a human to do a Cardassian's job.
They get so caught up in the fact that half of Ducat's plans involve murdering a lot of people quickly.
But he's good at it, so they should think his other plans will be just as successful.
Yeah, his plans are all very good. I would say his murderous plans often seem the most efficient, but then again, in a diplomatic sense, you're going to be unopposed at an empty table. So the quickest way to get things done is to empty it with force.
Odo and Ducat should be best friends.
Well, they were good friends before, in the good old days. Although I'm not sure how good. Odo doesn't seem to have as poor an opinion of the pre-Federation days as Kira does. I mean, obviously Kira's not going to be in favor of it, but Odo doesn't seem to be that fussed about it.
Yeah, to him it was just another time with a different person commanding the station. He still got to do his job. He still got to be Odo.
Yeah, it seems he will let slavery slide if other forms of justice can be dealt more efficiently. Actually, saying that sounds kind of weird.
Yeah. When you put it that way, you would think Odo would be more troubled by the past.
I'm sure he's just bottling it up inside.
And he has an incredible memory, so all of that would be weighing on him, presumably.
I guess he has a very them versus me attitude, though. He really feels like everyone who is not a shapeshifter is completely different race to him.
Yeah, that's true.
So I guess it's like a human getting their pets to behave or something.
No matter what, he's thinking, I wish these people would let me do my job.
We haven't talked about the Q-Man, Quark.
Did this episode end with him in jail?
Yeah, but he got Sakona to confess, so obviously they'll see that as a justification for releasing him.
He has plausible deniability. He could just say, I was selling this stuff. I didn't know what she was doing, which I think he says as much. And that's not enough to hold him. I don't think it's illegal to just sell weapons. Maybe it is.
I think it is illegal to sell weapons.
Whoops.
The way they talk about it. But he didn't sell them, he just put her in contact with a seller.
Oh, yeah, he facilitated the sell.
Yeah, but then he facilitated a confession that stopped the weapons being used. So I guess that cancels out, right? That's how the legal system works, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure.
If you sell or facilitate the sale of hundreds and hundreds of deadly weapons to a terrorist organization, but then tangentially happen to accidentally help someone confess somewhere that prevents something from happening, given a lot of effort by other people, then
That is
you're good.
completely sound, legally.
Despite the fact your motives were absolutely questionable in both instances.
Motive doesn't have legal bearing. Speaking of the legal system, we hear a bit of the Cardassian legal system. In Cardassia, the verdict is always known before the trial begins, and it's always the same.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
When you first hear it, you think, well, that's obviously horrible, but it's really not that different from how humans act now. If you look at incarceration rates for minorities and how much higher it is, people have prejudices and they won't always outright say it, but they exist, and people will decide, oh, he looks guilty, even before the trial begins.
Yeah, that's why there's a lot of laws in place to limit information and prevent people from making judgments. And certainly in the UK, where I come from, it is a crime to imply guilt on someone who has not yet been found guilty by in an ongoing trial. So even if it's something pretty obvious, the newspapers will still say the suspect or the alleged killer or whatever until the verdict comes out. Otherwise, I think they're liable. I might be wrong on this. I've never run a newspaper, but it seems. I think it's like that.
Over here, they make sure to tell juries, just because this person is charged with a crime, that's not evidence of guilt. But I know people think, well, why is that person charged if they're not guilty? And they try to weed those people out, but they could still think, people who make it to the jury, oh, he was charged, he's probably guilty.
Yes, see 12 Angry Men.
Yeah, exactly. So that line was really interesting to me, from Ducat. The Cardassians are just open about their prejudice, whereas we try to pretend we don't have any.
I think it runs a little deeper than just prejudice. I mean, these are a race of people who have, allegedly, all have photographic memories, meticulous information skills. You're talking about everyone knowing everything. So, in a sense, the trial really would be a show trial because maybe the verdict really would be known in advance because everyone would just know enough about everything that went on. I guess that sounds kind of goofy, but
I don't think
it
so.
could be.
Makes sense.
It's a different situation from Earth where people are so fallible. The Kardashians are often said to be very, very precise. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's a full justification. I'm just thinking maybe it's a little bit of a different society and very oppressive, sort of 1984 style one. So they reached the verdict first and then nabbed the guy.
Yeah, and then the trial is just a formality.
Yeah, it's already played out to its logical conclusion before the arrest happens. So it's just reality TV.
It sounds horrible to our human ears, but after your explanation just now, it makes sense for the Cardassians to operate that way.
I'm not trying to justify things here.
No, I'm not saying you're advocating, well, let's just pronounce people guilty or not guilty right away. But they do have enhanced memories and perception, so it's different. It's not the same context.
Also, I'd point out if it was not guilty, they probably wouldn't arrest them.
Yeah.
That would be pointless.
You're not guilty. Come with me. Wait, what?
I have one thing I'd like to criticize, other than the space battle at the end was just plodding and not that exciting. It was about as exciting as a game of Pong. Oh, they shot us. We'll shoot them. Then they'll shoot us.
Let's shoot them again.
And they were outnumbered 3-2, so obviously the 3 ships beat 2.
Who could have seen this coming?
It's about as exciting as one of the unit attacks in Advance Wars.
Again, someone loses because they can't count.
The thing I would like to criticize is that Sisko gave Hudson his uniform back.
And then he zaps it?
Well, he zaps it. I was wondering why it didn't dissolve the whole table. How does it know to stop at the uniform?
He had it set on zap uniform only setting?
Well, zap the bag as well. Bags and uniforms.
Yeah, the bag and uniform setting.
Yeah, well, what I actually wanted to address was that Sisko said he saw Hudson first put on the uniform.
It's just a uniform, Ben.
Is that all it is? I remember when you first put it on.
Which I immediately took to mean that he saw him change into it.
That's a reasonable interpretation.
Just seems odd. He got a uniform, and he was like, "Hey, Sisko, I got a new uniform. Come over and watch me change."
Does Starfleet Academy have the equivalent of locker rooms? It is like a school, right?
It's like a military sort of place, like a navy or something. I don't know. I think they have quarters. I can't remember. It's been seen in Next Gen a couple times.
It's possible they have communal changing areas.
But he wouldn't. He's getting promoted to admiral. He would have his own room. I imagined that he called Sisko into his office and said, "Watch this."
It could be a hazing thing for admirals. They make you change in front of everyone.
I would hope that hazing is not a thing in the 25th century, 24th century.
He invited him over, and Sisko watched him change into it.
They must be quite close then. No wonder he didn't shoot him.
Yeah,
was
that's
so
why.
annoyed.
That's why he's so annoyed.
He's the bad guy. Shoot him.
Why aren't you shooting him? This is the time to shoot.
I just expected the cat to go, "Ugh."
I expected him to hit the button. Just ignore Sisko.
Yeah, I did too, but I knew that guy didn't die, so...
He stepped on his toes before, when he was speaking with that guy about his cargo. He just started talking while Cisco was trying to negotiate with him.
Yeah, but that's because Cisco is not great at... he's good at negotiating. I don't think what Descartes was doing was negotiating. I think it was more explaining to the guy what he needed to do to remain alive. That's the way the guy took it. He backed down. Absolutely. Descartes even did the whole, I'm going to count to 10.
Yeah.
If you don't surrender, I'm going to be so mad. I can't even tell you what I'm going to do.
I wanted him to skip numbers and just go 10, 9, 2.
He did. 15,
Yeah,
10, 7, 4.
More quickly.
He did. He skipped. There was no way 15 seconds. And this is surrendering an entire illegal arms shipment. How strict do you want me to be? I'm going to count to 10. If you don't surrender, you're dead. 1, 2, 10. Bad luck.
Yeah.
He's not 12 years old. He just happens to have plans that involve shooting everyone all the time.
That was weird to me that Cisco wanted to just scan this ship without their knowledge. So you can just go around scanning any ship, what their cargo is? That's an unreasonable search.
Yeah, but it's not accurate. It's like a X-ray at an airport. It shows up some stuff. Like sometimes it's disguised, or in this case, the hull, they couldn't see through it. Or I think if their shields are up, sometimes they can't look inside. Sometimes they can. It's one of these plot things. We had a rule of acquisition. Rule number 3, never spend more for an acquisition than you have to. I think this one's been mentioned before, hasn't it?
I don't know. I didn't recognize it.
Oh, well, what did you think of it?
It seems kind of myopic. What if spending more on this acquisition opens the door for future larger acquisitions?
Yeah, that's true. So it's a bad rule.
I would say so. Yeah, you shouldn't spend more than you have to usually, but that's not a hard and fast rule. Well, I guess it is for the Ferengi, but it shouldn't be.
Maybe it should have been spend as little as you can, but as much as you need to.
Ah, that's perfect.
Although it wouldn't have served the conversation as well.
Yeah, the Vulcan would say, well, I'm doing that second part.
So, do you have an entertaining string of words known as a quote?
It's easy to be a saint in paradise.
Yeah, that is interesting you picked that one.
Why do you say that?
Well, Deep Space Nine is an interesting show in that it shows a much darker side of Starfleet and the Federation, outside of the happy-clappy Earth stuff, out in the far reaches. In episode 1, I think Bashir said, way out in the digs or something. Everything's not so happy, not so good. The head writers wanted to push that angle in Next Gen, but they weren't allowed to.
Oh.
So part of the reason they pushed for Deep Space Nine is that they could start to make it a little bit less perfect. And that particular line was one of the ones Ira Stephen Burr, or maybe Michael Piller or someone, noted was one that he'd wanted to write in for a really long time, and who was relieved that he finally got to put it in Deep Space Nine. It's easy to be a saint in paradise. I think it shows a turning point in not just the show, but Star Trek in general. It shows it could have a darker side. And whilst this episode wasn't particularly dark, I mean, not really, but it definitely is. There's a different vibe to it than there is in Next Gen. There's a lot more moral ambiguity, things like terrorism and armed conflict escalation, which have absolutely no easy diplomatic or logical solution, and as well as other things that they've put in the show, such as occupation of Bajor. It sort of shows the direction the show is intending to go in. So nice choice, 10 out of 10.
I really lucked into that one. The line stood out to me because this show does explore dark areas. I didn't realize it was darker than what other Star Trek series have done. There is a lot of moral ambiguity in this show, and I'm always drawn to that. The good guys aren't wholly good, the bad guys aren't wholly bad, because that's how real life is. It's not just evil people and good people. And I'm glad this show is willing to go there. And that seems unusual when you think about how old this show is. I don't think a lot of shows, if any, were exploring that.
Yeah, Next Gen is definitely not like this. Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, always insisted that there should never be strife between Federation officers. They always work together. And as well, Next Gen, almost every episode has everything ties together, and you leave it exactly the way you started it. So it kind of nothing too bad ever happens. This show, they included the Bajorans and Occupation, so that it wouldn't just be Starfleet guys. So they could still have Starfleet guys getting along, but not necessarily getting along with Bajorans.
Yeah.
And the Bajoran government and the Cardassian government. And that opened the possibility for all these different characters who are not just good guys or just bad guys. And I think the Maquis are a good example of that, although they were a bit silly. I should say they are a bit silly because they're not blown up yet. All right, I think that is a wrap.
Yep.
On to the next one, which is The Wire. I've heard that's the best TV show ever. No, I'm going to make all these jokes next episode.
All right.